bring this thing to order and get started. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. I will start with the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Go second.
Second.
Questions? Comments? Anything you want me to pull? Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right. Dutchess County BOCES budget presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're really happy to be here to be able to talk a little bit about our partnership and to talk a little bit about our 26-27 proposed budget. I'm Dr. Jody DeLucia. I'm the district superintendent at Dutchess BOCES. I know some of you, but it was lovely to meet some of you earlier. And this is our assistant superintendent for business services and operations, Michael Scarrett, and we're really happy to be here tonight. He gets to do all the money stuff, and I get to do all the fun stuff. So that's how it goes. But we do look forward to the opportunity to discuss with you a little bit about where we are on our journey of innovation, partnership, and growth. You'll see on some of the slides, even some of the dollars represent the real partnership with the Millbrook Central School District, and we're so thankful for that partnership and for the opportunities to find space and really provide opportunities for students, particularly some of those who are often the furthest from them. So thank you for that partnership. I have literally no idea how to use this clicker. You click. Okay. So you went too far. This is, of course, our Board of Trustees. I want to just give you a little bit of information. Of course, our board president is Ralph Chimento, and we do have 2 open seats this year. So the nomination phase has passed. We do have 2 open seats and 2 folks who are running. We have Judy Moran from the Webutuck Central School District and Mark Fleischhauer from the Rhinebeck Central School District who's running. The nominations came to us on March 20th. That was the due date. And our annual meeting is actually tomorrow in our conference center at 4:30 p.m. Of course, everybody is invited. Our kiddos will serve out a small feast for us from our culinary program following the annual meeting, where we will give almost the same presentation, but just a countywide version. And the board will officially adopt our budget. The vote will be held on April 28th. So you guys will vote and you'll vote as well for the candidates for the board on that day. Next slide. So now I get to let Mike do all of the money talk. And then we have to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you again very much for the opportunity to be here. You certainly know how busy your agenda is tonight. It's an important time of the year and you have a lot of content. So I'm going to try to move relatively quickly. If I move too quickly, slow me down. I'm going to leave some time at the end for questions as well. But even before I kind of get into the money talk, I do like to just kind of lay out our timelines. Our budget process, like school districts, really starts in the fall. It's kind of challenging for a BOCES when we're trying to project what districts might need for their following school year, when we haven't even rolled out our rate structure yet. But it's really important that we kind of start that process then. We really tap into our professional networks, the superintendents, the business officials, pupil personnel folks, and we try to get a sense of what's happening within the districts and on the ground, and what might districts need moving forward, and how might we try to meet those needs and improve that. By January, we need to produce a services guide that includes our rates and narratives and forms where we ask the districts to spend the next few months really trying to give us a good sense of what their preliminary needs are. I asked for that by the first week of April so that I could spend really the next month and a half working with the districts and with our departments to try to meet those needs. What staffing levels do we need? What vendor contracts might we need to enter into on your behalf? So that again, you can open school the following year in a great position from a BOCES perspective. Like Dr. DeLucia said, tomorrow night, our board will see this and adopt this budget, the administration portion of this budget officially. And then on the 28th, the component districts will vote on that. So that's where we're really going to spend our time tonight is the administration budget. And then I'll talk also about the capital budget, which is an allocation to the schools. There's a whole lot of other services, but you're going to purchase those as you need, as your desires and wants change throughout the school year. So we're not going to talk so much about that tonight. And then on June 10th, our board will officially approve our initial budget, including all of our COCERT services, including admin and capital. And I joke that 5 minutes after they do, it's outdated because some district has come forward and asked for a change in service, an increase, a decrease, whatever it might be. And it's our job as a BOCES to meet those needs from that point forward through the end of the school year. And that's really what we're here to do. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the admin and capital pieces. Those are the small slivers at the top. But I'd like to show this pie chart. Our budget is around 130 million. So this just in kind of percentage terms, kind of shows where those major lines of business come from. The lower right-hand corner there is an orange sliver. It's our special and alternative education department, as you would expect from a BOCES. It's the largest piece of our budget. Kind of moving counterclockwise. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education, so that's the trade programs. And I know you sent some of your students to, we're really proud of. Top sections there are admin and capital. We'll talk about that. Cross contracts are contracts that districts take out with other BOCES. The largest one is the Regional Information Center over at Ulster BOCES. They may also be programs at P&W BOCES or OU BOCES if that BOCES has a service that we may not offer or the district would prefer to utilize. Continuing to move management services would be things like public information officer, safety and security, kind of those services that allow many times a non-instructional service that help the district kind of manage their operations. Learning technologies would be the IT supports that you have both in the classroom and your infrastructure and some of the infrastructure things that you have both from an equipment and a software perspective. And then ed resources is really professional development and curriculum. Key budget assumptions. So our BOCES, just like a school district, we have to start with a set of assumptions. And these are general high-level assumptions that we have to make as we look at our rates across all of our different divisions. We have a teacher's contract that expires on June 30th. So we're in negotiations now with our unit. We need obviously a new bargaining agreement that's both fair to our teachers and prudent from a cost perspective. So that's going to be really important to us moving forward. We've used 9.9% for health insurance, both active and retirees, across all of our budgets. You're going to see in just a second, that's really split between Medicare rates or those that have Medicare as their primary insurance and those that are non-Medicare. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second here and how that really impacts our administrative budget. We're making strategic investments in cutting-edge CTE instructional technologies and equipment. We want our students to be able to leave our CTE programs, leave the classroom, and ultimately join the workforce, having worked on the same sort of equipment and software programs that they're going to need when they hopefully see gainful employment. Dr. DeLucia is going to talk a little bit in a minute about our special ed referral needs. We're seeing more and more kids at the youngest levels being referred to our BOCES, and how are we going to try to meet those needs when we have such space restrictions? We've seen growth in the early college and dual enrollment programs. We're rolling out a new district safety and security service that we're really proud of, that we want to bring kind of to this county and want to service the districts here in Dutchess. And then our discretionary spending controls need to be consistent with what the district budget pressures are. So we have many COCERs that increase over time, but we do have some static pockets where costs are relatively fixed, like you would see in a school district. And we need to maintain those same levels of controls and prudence that you all have to deal with every year. The administration budget. So obviously there's a lot of line items within the administrative COCER. Try to distill it down to make this simple for us to kind of see. But at the very top there, the total budget is a 4.14% increase. Certainly slightly more than we would want in any given year. But as we peel that onion back a little bit, we see the non-retiree administrative expenses. So those would be basically your active employees. We have our Board of Education some of those expenses in there for their memberships and some of their travels. But then it's really the superintendent's office, the deputy superintendent's office, business office, and HR. That increase year over year is 1.09. We preach a lot. We have to control our controllables. We really feel like we've tried to do that to the highest level possible year over year. Our retiree health insurance and Medicare reimbursement line, 5.23%. So by law, regardless of where the employee sits when they're in active employment at the BOCES, immediately upon retirement, if they're eligible for health insurance, that cost must shift to the administrative budget. So it makes it a difficult proposition for the BOCES when we're one of 24 members of the Dutchess Educational Health Insurance Consortium. We get a vote, but we move with the group. So if that group sees increases that are larger than they would hope year over year, we're impacted by that tremendously. The one benefit we do have is that I mentioned just a few minutes ago about there's a Medicare rate and a non-Medicare rate. And the lion's share, over 90% of our retirees are Medicare eligible. So that increase is down around 5.23%, whereas if that's a non-Medicare plan, it's well into the double digits. So the average is 9.9%. But we benefit a little bit from having so many Medicare eligible retirees. Still, again, higher than we would want, but that's where the industry and health insurance has gone. I do believe we benefited from being a part of DHIC over the years, but that's just, everybody knows what health insurance costs look like year over year. So you put the two together, it's the 4.14%. That's the cost side. The revenue side for our BOCES, we don't have the ability to levy taxes. We don't get state aid. Our revenues come from two sources. It comes from the contributions from the schools and it comes from other revenues. Within other revenues, we get a payment from DHIC to be the lead financial agent, produce all the financial documentation and information. But the bigger piece of that is interest income. If anyone has, CDs or savings accounts, you've seen those rates come down, and I expect those rates to come down even further year over year. So I've took that interest income down about $30,000 year over year. That difference needs to get made up by the school districts. So the school district share, on average, across all the districts, is 4.94%.
Before you leave that chart, can you just explain to me, on the chart before that, you say 9.9% health insurance increase across active and retiree, but I only see 5.23.
Yep.
For
So that,
retiree.
yeah, so that slide was for our budget in total. So we have about 70 COSERs within the BOCES. 69 of them have pretty much entirely active employees. So that's where the active employee share, the non-Medicare plans, are somewhere probably around 12 or 13%. When you add in the Medicare plans, and most of those folks sit in our administrative budget, that's where you see the 5.23. When you meld the two together, the average across all of our COSERs is the 9.9%. Yeah, we want to focus on the admin budget here, just in the interest of time, and because that's the one budget you'll vote on the 28th. Everything else you'll decide whether or not you're going to participate based on the rate structure and your needs as a district. Once we know what the budget is, we then have to allocate it to the schools. The allocation methodology is again dictated by New York State, and it's based on a principle called RWADA. RWADA stands for Resident Weighted Average Daily Attendance. It's essentially your enrollment. You can kind of forget that term probably until I sit here again next year, but it's in essence your enrollment. It's a non-arbitrary way that the state sees as how do I divide this pie up essentially. Millbrook, year over year, your RWADA is down 36 students. So your year-to-year increase in the whole county is down 50, and there's some ups and some downs. But your share of the pie has actually gone down a little bit year over year. So even though the average is 4.94, your year over year increase is actually 0.29%, or just about flat. As I move to capital, and we like to talk about the capital budget because it's an allocation to schools. We want to be your partner in this journey, so this is not something you vote on, but we want obviously your support on this as well. There's two pieces of this budget. There's a transfer from the general fund into the capital COSER to support things like an HVAC unit that might go, or a small roof leak, things outside of your general operating O&M budget that you just can't sustain there, but not a large capital project. So kind of that middle ground. And then the rental fees that we pay to schools if we have classrooms in schools. When you put the two together, it's $1,061,200, or an increase of $1,200 year over year. Again, because of your decreasing our WADA, you're actually seeing a decrease year over year of $962. So when you put capital and admin together, you're actually down year over.
And I just would like to point out that thanks to the partnership that we have, some of that rental is actually coming back to Millbrook. Because we have students right now in the elementary schools in our in-district programs.
And then I'd like to just kind of wrap up the financial piece with just a slide here that shows what was the contract that you had last year, and then ultimately what was the money that you got back via two sources. One, surplus. Surplus would be any revenues in excess of expenses. You'll typically see this in a BOCES if you think about student-based programs. We have to build a budget based on a certain number of students and a certain staffing level, but if we get an extra student, we typically don't need to hire another teacher or add more light or heat to the classroom. That revenue that we've generated typically can get returned to the schools. And by law, we're not allowed to carry a surplus from one year to the next. So unlike schools where you can have a 4% unreserved fund balance, everything that we generate every year has to go back, and we start fresh in July. It makes it actually kind of exciting. So we returned that back to the schools for you guys. It was a shade over $250,000. And then there's aid on those services. So the aid was $638,000. And that depends on what services you're in and your aid ratio. But all in, you receive just under $900,000 back on that 2.7 million, or just under 33%. Do always include the caveat here that that doesn't include any high cost aid you get back on your special ed students. That's aided directly to the schools. I don't have visibility to that number, so I do exclude it, but that is higher than 33% actual. Okay. We'll leave more time at the end if there's any financial questions. With that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. DeLucia to talk about some more of the fun stuff. Okay.
So I do get to do the fun stuff because I get to talk about the kiddos, and that's one of my favorite things to do. I would do that all day, every day if I could. I do like to share what it is that your students are doing when they're with us. So in addition to housing an in-district program and potentially more in-district programs here moving forward, you have 3 students in our special education program in our Pegasus class in our Resilience Academy and the Alternative High School. So those are our students with fairly significant needs, generally on the autism spectrum. You have 29 students in our CTI building this year, 6 of them in automotive technology, 3 in welding fabrication, 3 in cosmetology, 3 in careers in animal and plant sciences, 2 each in the construction trades, culinary arts, security and law, small engine technology, and electrical trades. And then what Mike likes to call the assorted others, which is usually 1 in multiple programs, and we usually have run out of space on the slide. So that could be our fashion program, it could be a host of other programs, graphic design. So, those are what your kiddos are doing when they're with us. So about a year ago, actually March 5th was when I officially took this role a year ago. So about a year ago, we really undertook the process of strategic planning and creating our blueprint for excellence as an agency. We were really very thoughtful in that process because we knew that we really needed to be on a path of innovation, partnership, and growth. A very wise superintendent once sat in one of our board meetings with us and said to them, we try everything we can for our students to be successful when they're with us, and we don't want them to have less when they come to BOCES, right? We want them to have more so that they can be successful. We included as many stakeholders as we could in the process, thanks to any of you who came to the expo or who responded to any of the surveys that were out. And we identified these 4 priority areas. We've really done a lot of work in the past year in these 4 priority areas. So we have, the first priority area really is to become the first call, to really always pick up the phone, to try to be at the center, and to try to really be that intersection between the state education department, our school districts, our community and government, and our BOCES, right? So it's a very unique intersection point. The second is really to focus both internally and externally as a talent management and development hub. We know there are a lot of shortages across the region, and certainly we are the hub for professional development. And we have our first job fair coming up
18th.
next week, 2 weeks. And that will be for civil service positions as well as for certificated positions. We have a real focus on expanding student experiences, programming for students, right? So finding those, like I said at the beginning, those opportunities for those students who are the furthest from them. One of the things that you heard Mike talk about was really, we've kind of become the regional hub for special education supports for kindergartners in kind of a 7-county radius. There are really no programs available and placements available for students. When I took a look at the number of referrals, that means a district sent a referral for us to consider if we could place a student for kindergartners in 2022. We had 85 referrals. At the end of 2025, we had 180 kindergartners. Of that number, we were able to accept about 40 of them. So I just like to put that out there as a number for folks to reflect on in terms of the number of babies in our region who are not receiving the services that they need because there are no placement opportunities for them. I always use the phrase, if not us, then who? And so that's why we continue on this path and continue to find partners who are willing to make space for us to provide the supports that our kiddos need. We also are, of course, expanding our CTI programming and rebranding some of our programs. So a great example would be our small engine repair program, which now will include marine and sports science technology. So, you know, we don't just have to have broken lawnmowers outside anymore. That's not the only career available for students who work in small engine repair, right? In fact, it's much more likely across the region that they'll find a job fixing boats because there's not a single person out there, from what I understand, who is a boat mechanic right now if you need one. And of course, we have operations. So based on the numbers and the information, that's just a small tidbit. I just don't want to bore everybody with that of all of the new programs that we're offering next year for kiddos. We're also expanding CTE to support our students with disabilities, which I think is a really important point. I did forget to say it, but through our culinary program. So maybe they're not going to be successful using knives and working in the kitchen full time, but they're certainly going to be successful front of house, and we want to give them those opportunities as well. Our last is operations, so certainly we're very happy to have completed our capital project. But what I can tell you is if we don't count kindergarten, just if we don't count it at all, we would be about 12 classrooms short next year of being able to accept all of the referrals that come to us. And it's not as easy as just saying, you can have our space, you can have a classroom here, right? It depends on the student's profile and if we can safely incorporate that into other environments besides our schools. So we are undergoing a space utilization study. If we wanted to just have the same number of kindergarten classrooms that we opened this year, we would pretty much have to move our middle school out to somewhere else. Right? So these are all conversations that we're having, trying to figure out how we can safely do this. We do still have a space utilization study open on our website. It's one question about what programs and services that each district and partner feels we should focus on developing the most. And so I think it's really important to just help districts know that we have a lot of babies that there are no services for and a lot of programs that we want to expand across the whole county. And that not only are we seeking partnership, but that we all have to work together to find solutions for students, right? So with that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We're here for any questions that you might have. And again, we really just appreciate the opportunity to be here and I hope I see some of you tomorrow.
So it's probably more a question for you, Riley. What if we had to go to contingency, what does it do to, CTI or anything both these?
So if we go to contingency, we're looking at a $2.4 million cut to our budget. And so we're gonna go through some of the ways in which we would start to do that.
Just. for
Anything
this
is on the
field.
table. Anything that is not mandated services is on the table. Which I mean, I think that's something that they're probably hearing from all the districts in the region. Cause we're all kind of in the same boat.
I just seeing us cut any of the programs, whether it's CTI or get to it, but sports, any of those things. And the state still has no budget. States, we still have no idea what state aid is, we're gonna get, if anything. They're planning their 2-week vacation, so, maybe in a month, we'll hear back from our supporters in Albany. But I just need people to understand that, the impact of contingency goes well beyond the soft stuff that we think. It's, there are kids that are depending on CTI for the rest of their lives. That's, where they're gonna get their skills from. And anyway, all right.
So Perry, there's also a fiscal piece to that as well, right? So one of the things that I'm sure that Elliot could speak to better than I can, but cutting significant cuts to BOCES services has a longer term effect on a district because you have a 2-year rolling aid rate that would be cut that you would no longer have as an income moving forward, right? So that's what makes it so difficult. So if you think about that amount, I don't have the slide up, of aid, and you compound it with your special ed aid, and then you were to cut, the majority of your services, that's 2 years worth of aid that you wouldn't get as income for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So it compounds, right?
Right, so BOCES is not an ideal place to cut, but I think when we look at the program slide,
Yep.
there is no ideal place to cut, right, as we've looked at before, so that's why I keep going back to saying, when we look at that program slide, these are not things that we would suggest cutting, but if it is not mandated, unfortunately, at this point, it is on the table to be cut, right, in the worst case scenario, so yes, BOCES does have an aid impact as well, but we have to plainly look at everything that is not a mandated service.
And we're making decisions based on paper. I mean, I don't know, at home, you wouldn't say, geez, I wonder what kind of money will be coming in my paycheck this week. Then I'll decide what what food I can buy. But that's what the state asks us to do every year. It's, anyway, before I start saying things I shouldn't say. All right, any questions for?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for having us.
everybody.
Thank you. There you go. Next, the vice president report. I was gonna talk about some other stuff, but for those that listen to our board meetings or come to our board meetings, I whine and wail about our state government and how ridiculous it is to ask us to do what we do with a budget when we can't even figure out what aid we're getting. And then we got the state budget extender number 2 is to provide state government operations so that they basically can push out, just like the feds are doing, push out our budget. But the summary is there have been no reports of any new progress made on budget negotiations in recent days. That was not unexpected, with many legislators and staff observing holidays during that time, potentially complicating budget work. We go through this every year. Every year we have to sit and try to do a budget without any idea of the money that we're supposed to get from the state. And that goes on, I think last year it went on till September, is that right?
We got our actions.
Yeah, I mean, so we plan a budget out in April, by law, it's supposed to be April 1st. We get nothing until September, 4 months into this school year. And then we have to figure out what to do. And there's specific rules, and I know you guys will talk about it on, if the budget fails, there's specific rules on what we have to do with contingency. And personally, we have spent so much time building programs, looking for partners in sports, looking for, trying to continue our music program. And we're trying to do that based on a budget that's vaporware. Anyway, that's my report. Chris, you got anything?
No.
Alright. Facilities?
Good afternoon, everyone.
John.
I just wanted to again thanks all the entire facilities team, guys, for this winter, in the winter, amount of snow we got, the cold. These guys were in here on Saturday and Sunday night. And we got through it. We didn't miss any school and, just transportation outside of my hands. But I just want to thank the guys, they worked really hard. Spring is here. And you got my report. Just want to say a couple of things. We had our first baseball scrimmage game. We were able to get the guys up on that field. That field was soaking wet, set from all that snow and ice and everything up there, but we were able, with hard work, to get the guys to play their first game on April 1st. So the guys are working good up at the field. And in the middle school, can't say enough about the student government. They're always sending me work requests. The kids are great. I love it. They'll send me an email with like 20 things on it. I jump right on it to take care of the kids. It's a great thing working with the kids. They got my email like, Mr. Mullins, can we do this? Can we do this? And we jump right on. We completed all their tasks. Anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you, John. Tell you guys that, getting up on that roof, shoveling snow off the roof so the roof doesn't, the ceilings don't collapse. And the water doesn't come pouring in down the hallways. And they're up on the roof and, because it seems to get a little windy up here from time to time. And for those guys to be up there in that weather and that temperature, shoveling off our roof so that we don't do even more damage. That's really
We
appreciated.
got through it this year. The guys did a lot of hard work.
Very good. Any questions for John?
I'm just curious, you don't have to go through the long list of student government, but what were a few of their?
A lot of them had to do with the bathrooms, like, this sink is not working, or the water's coming out slowly, like, things that you usually wouldn't think that the kids would come up with, but, some ceiling tiles in the hallways, and they might want to board up, call board, so they can put their notices up on student government, so whatever they is,
That's
whatever they
good.
want the kids.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Jen Fike works strongly with them, and, Mr. Whitaker, so, it's like a team thing.
Sorry, no, I see.
I'll come into work one day, I go on my email, there they are, the student government.
Thank you.
Very good, John. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Eric?
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I know we have a long agenda, so I'll do my best to be brief. And first I'll start, and I would be remiss if I didn't share what I shared in January. It just continues to be a great school year at the high school. You should be really proud of the kids as they continue to strive in all facets of their education. So in terms of instruction, since the beginning of this school year, we've been working with our teachers on Tier 1 intervention work, providing students with all the support in the classroom settings. So over the course of the first few months, we aimed our focus on academic support. The past 3 months, focusing on behavior interventions. And then next week and the month of May and June, we will be focusing on social emotional support. Additionally, we continue to utilize Edmentum as weekly practice in all of our math and ELA classrooms. Our English and social studies teachers continue to work with Garrett Jones Roy. They met with him last month during our superintendent's conference day, and then they had a follow-up session recently. Our math teachers continue to work with Dan August, and they have found a lot of value in his work. And now that we are back from spring break, teachers are buckling down along with the students, and we're starting to prepare for our upcoming AP and Regents exams. In terms of safety, we are fully up to date with all of our drills. We have one lockdown drill left, scheduled for the fourth quarter. And we will then have met all the required and then some drills. The Millbrook High School safety team will be assisting Elm Drive in their reunification drill that's scheduled on May 12th. And recently, members of our safety team, including our new school nurse, completed the required cardiac emergency response drill. And then in terms of highlights, again, we have a lot to be proud of. In January, you gave us a blessing for our Model UN club to participate in their annual conference. We had 20 students spend a long weekend representing Argentina and India this year. 4 of our students earned top awards. We had 2 students, Addie Francia and Kimura O'Farrell, earned the awards of excellence. We also had Cameron Lavelle and Serena Bunga receive the awards of distinction. And then we had 4 students, Johnny Jacob, Brody Augusta, Sophie Stalker, and Jackie Venga Lopez speak at closing ceremonies. So in total, 8 of our 20 delegates gave final speeches in front of over 2,000 students. It was very impressive. So I just would like to definitely highlight and congratulate all of our Model UN students and Dr. Betts, and for your continued support. Additionally, we recently had 17 new Honor Society inductees. So thank you to Ms. Severio, our advisor, for her dedication and the support of our students. And congratulations to all of our members. And speaking of Ms. Silverio, her mock trial and business law classes conducted 2 mock trials in the auditorium recently. That was really a cool experience for all of our kids. We had parents come, students were there, and they both teams had the opportunity to conduct 2 different trials, and I actually had the opportunity to be a judge in the second trial. I had a blast. So that was a lot of fun. Another fun and what has become an annual event, Mrs. DeRosa, our global teacher, along with her students, facilitated global games with our middle school students. Our students worked really hard on the creation of their games, and a special thanks to all the middle school students and their teachers for their participation. And then lastly, spring sports are underway, our final season of the 25-26 school year. And they're certainly here in attendance, but I would definitely like to recognize and thank the athletic boosters for all of their support this year. They've been fantastic. Additionally, we have Music in the Parks trip this Friday and Saturday. Our college and career fair is scheduled for April 23rd at 11 a.m. We have our prom on April 24th. And then, as I explained, we have AP exams coming up between May 5th and May 12th. And then Regents exams June 9th, 10th, and then June 15th through the 25th. And lastly, graduation is scheduled for June 12th, 7 p.m.
Do you have any numbers from I think last year we had a lot of the college and career people showing up. Any numbers?
I don't know the exact numbers. I know still some are just RSVPing to Mr. Chanowski, who's in charge, but we have a good amount of representation there. Looking forward to it.
All right. Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
All right. Superintendent's report.
Yeah, so my report is going to be passed to the board members because there's so many items that don't fit on one document, but there are multiple attachments, if you will. So I'm gonna start with something that I received this week that is good news for some, tough news for the district. So there's some negotiations around tier 6 of the teachers' retirement system. And so while they're working to basically restructure tier 6 to try and bring more folks into the field, what that will essentially mean is increases of what they estimate to be in excess of $100 million that will go back to expenses to school districts. So it would reduce the contributions of newer to tier 6 teaching employees. But the impact will be then on school districts. So one of the biggest things is previous tiers of employees pay into their retirement a percentage for a certain fixed number of years. Tier 6, their payment is higher, it is longer. And depending on how much they make, the retirement system is essentially aiming to restructure their payments into salary bands so that their contribution would be in relation to how much they make essentially. Which is good for teaching employees and bringing folks into the field. But those expenses essentially are going to have to be made up somewhere, and they're estimating $108 million in expenses going back to school districts. And that's the school districts outside of New York City. New York City is in a different retirement structure. So I did want to start with that because it is not great news for school districts, but it is good news for teachers. I do have some other what I think is positive strides that we're making throughout the state. So as you know, I sit on the Lower Hudson Education Coalition Steering Committee. I mentioned to you a couple of meetings back that we had prepared an op-ed that went to the Public Service Commission petitioning for an examination of the utility readiness for the electric vehicle conversion. So for those that may not have in the millions, districts at this point as a legislative mandate are required to convert all of their vehicles in purchases beginning in the 2027 school year to electric vehicles. And by 2035, the full fleet of vehicles is required to be electric. And so one of the things that we've done, I sit on this steering committee for the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, but also I'm the secretary of the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents. And through those two committees, we've done a lot of advocacy around this. And one of the things that we did was we brought together a forum down in Westchester about the conversion to electric, like fleet electrification essentially. And we had tri-utility companies come with representation, and basically they were like, we can't actually do this. We don't have the capacity to do this. And the timeline is it's just not feasible for us to get prepared in this timeline. And so regardless of how many times in which we have said this out loud, and said it to anyone who will listen. So part of the charge of the committees that I work with is we meet with legislators and we bring this information forward so that they have the knowledge to essentially try and create legislative change on our behalf. So in so doing, we have really gotten nowhere, right? We pushed out the beginning timeline. So if you can't do this by 2027, okay, we'll give you a waiver, but nothing is changing that back end date of 2035. And so this looking like a real impossibility, we've continued to try and push in essentially any forum we can find an audience. And so at this point, we've pushed the Public Service Commission to actually have a public examination of the utility companies to basically say, listen, we agree with the environmental, goals of wanting to protect the environment, but the reality is that school districts, number one, can't afford this. These buses cost about $440,000 as opposed to an internal combustion engine bus that's about $170,000. And so just that alone, that's one. Other problem is we would need to have charging facilities for these buses. Those are, additional astronomical costs associated with that. The grid can't actually support it. The batteries that they currently have don't even have the lifespan to be able to make our runs in a district like Millbrook. We would have to essentially double, if not more, our fleet of buses that we contracted for student. And so all of these things just become very unrealistic. And so when we have NYSERDA as a partner, who's doing these fleet electrification studies for school districts. Crazy things are coming up, like one district across the river, Sullivan West, they have a geographic square square mileage of about 250 plus square miles. And so realistically speaking, one bus cannot actually do a run just from home to school. And so NYSERDA's answer is, well, that's okay. We can create transfer depots and the kids can get off one bus and get on another bus. So that's like, these are the solutions that we're being fed as school districts with essentially no relief. And so the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, made up of superintendents and board members from 5-county region, has done this with the council that works with the coalition. And so I have shared with the board members, and if anyone is interested, please email me. It's a public document at this point. And so we've done this in support of the proceedings to examine electric utility readiness. And then each school district additionally, so we did this as a coalition, but each school district is encouraged to write a letter. And so I have a draft of the template letter and then one that's prepared for Millbrook for board members to review. And with your support, I can send that in via the email that's provided. In addition, the Lower Hudson Education Coalition has been working feverishly on in supporting bills introduced by Shelley Mayer. Shelley Mayer, for those of you that don't know, is the Senate Education Chair. She works very closely with the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents and the Lower Hudson Education Coalition. And so I've had the fortunate experience of having several meetings with her about, you'll hear multiple different topics that I'm going to talk about, all come back to public schools and protecting public schools against what's happening throughout the state, which is really eroding a lot of the funding towards public schools for various different reasons, one of which is the charter school network. And so if you've not heard about this, charter schools can be approved in multiple ways. One of which is they can actually create an application and send it to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents has a fixed number of days to respond. The tricky part about that is the Board of Regents schedule works in such a way that if you file that application at just the right time, the Board of Regents will not have a meeting and automatically that charter school will be approved because the Board of Regents fails to respond. If the Board of Regents responds and declines the charter school application, they can then go through the SUNY board. And so the SUNY board essentially is able to support some of these applications without any changes, even though the Board of Regents, who governs New York State education essentially with the education department, even if they decline it, SUNY can approve it without them making any changes. And so we don't dislike charter schools, but the problem is when a child from Millbrook, as an example, goes to a charter school, any funding associated with that child goes with them. And even if that child were to return back to a public school, their money stays with the charter network. And so we are trying to protect, I have a document that has been compiled. Again, the Lower Hudson Education Coalition is a 5-county region. The Lower Hudson Council of Superintendents is a 4-county region of 70 school districts. And we've compiled information, and this is millions of dollars of public school money that's being funneled into charter schools when charter schools are not meant to follow any of the same accountability standards that we are. And essentially, the funding that is targeted for public education is being funneled into these charter schools, and it does not return. So this here is a memo of support for the bill that is currently in the legislature right now for consideration that will be voted on in a short time. So that is from Lower Hudson Education Coalition. And then additionally, we have an op-ed here. This is a single page back and front. And so one of the other things that we are currently working on is, again, protecting public education. So the interscholastic athletic championships, if you have been watching at all, what we are seeing is many of the sports championships are going to non-public schools. And so what I mean by that is that at the state competition level, you have in some cases, and one of the cases in here is actually a situation where there was not even a public high school in the state tournament for the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. It was 2 private schools playing each other for the championship. And so we're seeing more and more of this. And what we have chosen to describe this as is schools without boundaries. And what that means is, as a public school district, Millbrook can draw within a geographic area of the school district, and that is who we can take as athletes. We do not take students from outside of that geographic area because the funding for this public education comes from the taxpayers within that geographic area, and students with regular nighttime residence within the school district are the students that are able to come and attend and play and benefit from public education and public programs and services. Private schools are able to draw from essentially boundaryless geographic area. And so in certain areas of the state, we're feeling this much more deeply than others. But the reality is that what we have seen recently is there are some private schools in Westchester, one of which all 5 starters on their basketball team come from places outside of the geographic boundaries of that private school. 4 of them are Division I recruits from New Jersey. One is from Ireland. And so we are essentially taking the position that no child should be put at a competitive disadvantage by attending their home public school. And so it is not our position that we want to harm non-public schools in any way. We just want, after the regular season is over, for there to be a bifurcation where there is a public school championship for each sport and a private school championship for each sport. And so we've created a proposal that has been put forward. We worked very closely with NISPA, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. And unfortunately, at this point, there has been no movement on that. But there's been threats of lawsuits and whatnot that I think have prevented those who have voting power from actually taking a position to support this proposal. And so one of the beautiful things is we submitted an op-ed to the Times Union because that is where all of our assembly members and legislators will be getting their news shortly. So hopefully that gets picked up and copied out by other papers. But we also did just get notification today that there is a bill that has been introduced essentially in support of our efforts. So I will pass that around for the board as well. And then last but most definitely not least, we have the Department of Public Works let us know about some transportation difficulties that may result from the bridge being replaced on Burbank Road down in the town of Washington. So I will pass that around. And then congratulations to our Millbrook Middle School. We found out today that they have been named a 2026 Blue Ribbon Lighthouse School. So based on the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence National Assessment process. So we're super proud of this. I can't say enough. It's a pretty rigorous process. There's surveys, interviews, focus groups. There was a 2-day visit from an assessor who came. She came from the South. She spent 2 full days here, observing classrooms, meeting with teachers, parents, students, admin, really assessing everything that's going on here. And it's actually a really huge achievement to be designated as a lighthouse school, but an even bigger achievement for them to have done this just walking out of the first assessment. Typically speaking, they get an area, a list of areas in need of improvement. And it's not saying that anything's not going well. It's just saying that it's not going well enough to achieve this status. And so for Millbrook to have received this designation after the, initial application process is really impressive. And I think it speaks to all the hard work and great things that are happening in the middle school. And I did say to the other principals, so who's next? So we will be moving. I will surprise you all with which building has volunteered to go next, but it will be very exciting for everyone because I'm sure they will achieve as well. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Are there any districts that aren't participating? I gotta get my page. The Lower Hudson Educational Coalition, like are the majority of.
We had one standout in Dutchess County that I muscled into
Okay, so
participating, so all 13 are in Dutchess County. And that was the same board you had attended the legislative meeting that we did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm impressed at all the work that you and everyone else on this list are doing. It's sad that it's come to this, that it's gotta take so much to, I don't wanna say get so little, but you know, as a parent, as a taxpayer, as a board member, I appreciate what you're doing and what all of you guys are doing. As Perry said before, I don't wanna use any language that would color this meeting, but, it's a hard spot to be in. I think we're all feeling it, so I just want to thank you for, I know you guys are going above and beyond, so thank you.
A term you all, if you're around any of the people that are in school districts, you'll hear this term unfunded mandates. And this is like the vein of our existence is Albany says thou shalt have electric buses by this date. No idea how to pay for them. No idea if they work. No company, because the company went bankrupt, at least the last time they talked about it. They make us go do all kinds of studies to show why we can't do it. Like we have roads that can't, those buses are about 3 times the weight of a normal bus. Some of our roads, those buses will sink. When have our kids, it goes out and gets the high school kids, middle school kids, brings them back. Guess what? The electrical charge can't send them out again. So we need twice as many buses. What does the state tell us? Yeah, okay, figure out how to do it. And it's never ending. And yet we can't even get an answer back on what's the budget this year. It's really, they've sort of politicized this to say, you know, look at what we're doing. The Governor Hochul says we're gonna do electric buses and we're gonna save the planet. And you're not gonna do any of that. The grid's gonna collapse. We have no place to charge them. We can't afford to buy them and they don't go on our roads. But other than that, great idea. And it really is getting frustrating as hell trying to keep up with this stuff. And all it comes down to is we have to keep doing these, sending letters. There's also the Dutchess County School Board Association. We meet once a month to debate what should we send in the next letter off to Albany. And most of the time we get a big thank you, and that's the only part we hear about. So anyway, it's like my wine session. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Caroline?
Congratulations to the school, that's fantastic, for the middle school.
Okay.
Amidst all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's positive.
Right, it's such a shining light and you know, when I received the email today as a parent, it really went back to the old cliche of you can't judge a book by its cover, right? All last year we're worried about, well, we're still worried about the roof, right? But for somebody, an assessor, to come in so quickly and to see the substance of what's going on here, it's so refreshing. So congratulations. And I think she had also mentioned that we had a pretty high survey rate for survey rates.
Yes, we did.
It was around 20% maybe?
It was closer to 30.
30, so for everybody who helped and participated, it does matter
Yes.
when people take the time to share. So, thank you.
And thank you.
Anything else? All right, Amy?
It's the budget.
The budget. Oh, the budget?
Yeah, budget.
All right.
I'm the closer.
Sorry.
Because I felt my blood pressure coming down a little bit. Get that back
We're gonna
up.
bring that right back up for you.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to go through a lot of information, and then will answer any questions that the board might have. I will try to also answer questions that have been previously submitted because we want people to have the information that they desire. And so when we look at the first slide, it is a timeline essentially, just so folks understand. I know when BOCES was here before, they talked about how early we actually start this budget. And so We start the preliminary budget in January, and so it seems so far away when we're talking about next year. But essentially, our school district, the way in which our business runs is we are closing out one year, we are opening a new year, and we're already planning for the next year. And so we're currently in this little highlighted bubble in April, where we will do a budget development presentation. And then at our next board meeting on the 21st, the board will adopt a proposed budget and approves the property tax report card. And so you'll see that this is all leading up until the budget vote in May, which is our annual budget vote on May 19th. So, because and I'll just give a little background for folks that are in the audience who may not, budget works. So, there's essentially the proposed expenses for our budget. How much will it cost to run business next year, right? And so we'll talk about expenses. We're also going to talk about revenues, and revenues come essentially from, well, multiple places, but two of the biggest places is going to be our state aid package. And the other place is levied taxes. And so what Perry's been referring to this whole time is that New York State is supposed to have their budget adopted by April 1st. I gave you the April 21st timeline for us to adopt our proposed budget, which then our voters will vote on. That is a fixed date. We do not have any control over that. That is legislative. We are required to put a budget out for a Board of Education to adopt for voters to vote on in May. That is required to be out by that date. And we are essentially doing this at this point flying blind because we don't actually know how much money we are going to get from the state. And this is something that has become the norm in the since I have been in this seat and Elliot has been in that seat. We have never had a timely budget from New York State to be able to say factually, this is the money that we're going to get. And even beyond that, even the money that we are supposed to get is not always the money we do get. We get notices mid-year after our budget has been voted on, after we have determined how much money we have to operate. We get money that says, oh no, your state aid has been cut in this area by this much money. No warning, no reason, just here you go. We do have state aid budget reviews that we are able to apply for. We're currently doing one through NYSBA, that we are going back the last couple of fiscal years to be able to see if there's any recoverable state aid that for some reason the district didn't get. But typically speaking, we end up not even getting the state aid that we're promised in their budget. It doesn't happen. And so we will go through some of that. We will try to make it as friendly as possible to the layperson who doesn't deal in this every time. So if there are any questions, please ask. We will be happy to explain. So as we have said, this is an ever-changing situation that we are in. So from just last board meeting, the expense budget has changed slightly. So our projected expenses for the 26-27 school year at this point right now, as of March 30th, when this was created, it was $38,828,599. So that would be our operating budget for the 26-27 school year. That's a slight increase of $37,000. And I only say slight because it's slight in terms of the total budget, not slight for any personal budgeting, but for a school district budget, it is an adjustment from estimates to actual figures in certain various labor and professional contracts, as well as our BOCES cross contracts. So the way in which BOCES works is, as Mike Scarrett had said earlier, if there are services that Dutchess BOCES does not provide, we can seek those services from another BOCES, really even throughout the state, but it depends on the type. But this happens to be adjustments that were made from our local BOCES in the region, so Ulster BOCES and PNW BOCES. So as their cross contracts increase, so do our expenses. And so that's where this adjustment came from, is various different things listed there.
Can you clarify what we're talking about has nothing to do with the capital project?
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the capital project. These expenses are all coming from all the other things that have increased in price. So as you will see, some of our increases have been really unprecedented this year and very very concerning in terms of, going forward. And I will say to you, just as an aside, because Perry mentioned it, one of the things that we are facing is, increases in our health insurance. So, so significant in like the 10% range, which is extremely significant to a very small budget that we have. But one of the things I want to also say is, while we are seeing that, we are also doing work on the legislative end, part of the consortium the coalition that I belong to. We are working to have a bill brought forward on our behalf so that we are able to create a reserve fund. So any money that we do not spend in a given fiscal year, we could potentially put into a reserve fund to save for a rainy day increase in health insurance like this year that nobody was expecting. That was kind of outrageous. And so as a reminder, one of the things that governs how school districts can levy taxes is called the tax cap. There is a misnomer. People refer to it as a 2% tax cap. That's actually not true. There is a 7-step calculation that brings us to a figure of how much we are able to levy from year to year, in terms of an increase to taxpayers. And so the tax cap calculation for next year, the 26-27 year, which is what we're talking about, is calculated at 29,733,237, or an increase of $1,951,101, or 7.02%. And so if we set that tax levy at the tax cap, the difference between our expected revenues and expenses is that figure right there, which is $2,452,332. And so the budget gap typically gets closed by appropriating fund balance. So as I had mentioned, a budget is just like your home budget, right? It is an estimate of what you project to spend and how much you project to bring in. And so typically speaking, when we have a fund balance from one year, we can allocate some of those funds, or we can appropriate some of those funds to offset costs in the following year. However, we currently can't support an appropriation of $2.4 million. And in addition to that, when we do that, right, it requires us to keep doing that over time. And so when you look back in history in the past 7 years, our fund balance appropriation has grown from 374,000 in 18-19 to 1.85 million last year. And so that's a growth rate of 494%. And we have very specific reasons as to why that is happening. And so for the 25-26 school year, $1.85 million of appropriated fund balance represented 5.2% of the total budget. So just thinking of that, right, when we're only allowed to increase taxes by 2%, but we are allocating from one year to the next 5% of the budget from the fund balance appropriation, these factors get to a space where we can only do one of two things. We can only either decrease the amount that we're going to spend, and the ways to do that is to make pretty significant and deep cuts to the program services and offerings of the school district, or we can increase the revenue. School districts don't have many ways to increase revenue. You did hear Jody when she was here before. Millbrook has been one of those districts that has raised our hand and said, we have some space. We'll take some of your classes. So we do have classes operating, BOCES classes operating in district. And we will continue to look at ways in which we can partner with BOCES, because they are our students from our neighborhoods, right? So it's great for them to be back here with their neighborhood peers, not necessarily in Millbrook, but from Dutchess County often. And so some of the potential for expenses in terms of reduction would be looking at $1 million budget gap closure. These are some places where I said, these are not ideal cuts. We don't want to cut anything that's up on that screen right now. It is not our intention to do that. However, if you're saying you need to find $1 million somewhere, there's only so many places that we can find it that are not mandated. These are places that are not mandated to be provided within our budget. And so pre-K programs, there is an asterisk there because a large portion of our pre-K comes from grants, we get grant money for pre-K. And so even if it was the total program cost that we eliminated at $334,000, we would not then be getting a grant of $167,000 because it is a per pupil allocation. We do not get that money if we do not run a pre-K program. So it's not as if we can take that $167,000 and use it elsewhere. So it's not a total cost savings of $334,000.
And if we cut pre-K, so if we said in 25 or 26, 27, we're just done with pre-K. Isn't the state basically telling us the following year we have to implement pre-K?
Yes.
I
And
mean,
so,
it's,
yes, so
you know, we can cut
pre-K.
it and then they'll make us put it back in.
Correct. And
With no
so, right, and so pre-K is one of the things that Millbrook was ahead of the curve. We, the Board of Education approved the program, and then within that same fiscal year, the state actually then began this universal pre-K grant. So we had money in our budget for pre-K, and then they approved a pre-K grant. It doesn't cover the total cost of pre-K, as you can see, but it is some money coming back. For next year, the proposal that we have seen so far, because we don't know what the budget actually is, does offer a slight increase per pupil for pre-K, but it still won't cover the total cost of the program. Either way, cutting that program wouldn't be a direct dollar for dollar savings because some of that money is not paid by the district, it is paid by grants, which we would not get. And so eliminating all field trip transportation, again, $25,000 and the total budget is not a lot of money, but it is an area in which we do not have to do. Eliminating all co-curricular activities. And when I look at that, I look at eliminating opportunities for students, and I don't want to do that. But these are the stipends associated with co-curricular activities, eliminating the totality of the athletic programming, including any stipends that go along with that would be $629,000. Eliminating all staff professional development would be $66,000. Eliminating the elementary band program, again, not something we want to do, but it's not mandated. So this would not be the elementary music program. This would be the additional band opportunities that we have for students. And eliminating the summer scholars program, this would not be eliminating special education program that we are required by law. This would be the local program of summer scholars that we started back in 2020, I believe, or 2021, just after COVID, to really be able to help our students build their skills and, you know, retain their skill level throughout the summer. Again, these are options. These are nothing we want to cut, but these are options. Our partners at First Student have done a lot of work for us to look at reimagining transportation. Currently, the district provides transportation to students within a geographic boundary that is more lenient than state law requires. And so we are only required to transport elementary students outside of 2 miles from their district school. So if you live further away from your school than 2 miles, you are entitled to transportation. As a secondary student, if you live 3 miles away from your school or further, you are entitled to transportation. We provide transportation, much more lenient based on our policies. And so we looked at this. We are basically looking at absolutely everything that could potentially save money. And so again, not something we want to do, but when we're talking about cost reduction options, we have to look everywhere. And so to provide one tier of service, that means that all schools would operate on the same schedule, which means all students would be on the same buses. This is one option. We also have a transportation option of offering only based on the minimum distance. Again, those K-8 students, you'll notice pre-K is not on there because pre-K transportation is not required. And so if it is something that we would potentially have to cut, currently we get away with transporting pre-K students because they're on our buses, it costs no extra money, and the buses are already going that way, right? And so essentially we would be looking at K-8 student transportation outside of 2 miles and 9-12 student transportation outside of 3 miles. And so the combined option would be combined option number 3, which would be all schools operate on the same bus schedule. And we would be co-transporting on the same vehicles. And it would be the K-8 students only further out than 2 miles, and only the 9-12 students further out than 3 miles. And so if you look on the next slide, some information there about how many students essentially would be impacted. So we would be increasing the number of buses. So when you're looking at the AM and PM runs, we currently have 11 buses, and this is for in-district transportation. This does not include required transportation to special education programs that we would be required regardless. And so we have currently 11 buses that go out in the AM and the PM. And again, those are 2 runs. So they go out for the secondary kiddos, they come back, they go out for elementary kiddos, and then they do the same thing in the afternoon. And so if we went to 1 tier of service, we would have 15 buses instead of 11, because that's how many more, and bus routes will be longer, right? So that would impact students. 132 students would essentially lose transportation. And in addition to all of that, there is no guarantee that we will have enough drivers, because that is a problem that we have been dealing with for the last 5 school years, I would say. There just aren't enough drivers out there. So it's something that we deal with even now when we're talking about charter runs and stuff that are, atypical when we have field trips or when we have athletic competitions. Do we have a driver to be able to even do that? And so that is risky business in terms of being able to actually pull off transportation with additional drivers. If we went with just the legal minimum distance, we would reduce each run by 2 buses. And so that means we would have 9 buses going out for 2 runs in the morning and 9 buses going out for 2 runs in the afternoon. And then if we looked at the combined total, there would be 12 buses in the morning and 12 buses in the afternoon. Again, only making that 1 run. So that's 1 tier of service and only with the minimum distance. And so when we're looking at cost savings, option 1 could potentially save us $317,000. Option 2 could save us $181,000. And so the combined option of $453,000 in savings is something that could be potentially significant, right? When we're looking at that, we're looking at about $100,000, a little over, essentially, is those are positions, right? I just had a full slide of all of the program costs that potentially could be saved with $450,000. So it's pretty significant. And so we will be looking at these opportunities to save money anywhere that we can. This is basically just our notice to say all things are on the table. We are considering everything. And so when we look at that, we have to face the brutal reality that some of the other ways in which we can reduce expenses is essentially to cut staff. And one of the things that we absolutely do not want to do. But when we look at the reality that currently 65% of our proposed budget is comprised of labor expenses, salaries, and benefits, that is a fixed amount in our budget. That is not something that we can change without removing people from positions. And so we've already made the decision to not fill 8 positions. That is across all bargaining units. And what I mean by bargaining units is most people who work in a school district work in some labor unit, which has a collective bargaining agreement or a contract between the district and their union. And so it is not just one unit. This is administrative, this is teaching, and this is support staff. And so we've already agreed to not fill 8 vacant positions at this point. It is not that we do not need those positions, but I can sleep much better at night cutting a position with nobody in it than having to cut a position with impacting somebody's livelihood. And so that right there is a cost savings in and of itself of $721,000 from these reductions alone. However, in order to close the remaining estimated $1 million budget gap, we would have to cut another 14 positions, or approximately 8% of our workforce. And so when we are talking about options, here are this is essentially the menu of options that we have, is to cut transportation. We feel the most prudent option is the middle option, option 2, to be able to return to the state minimums at a cost savings of $181,000, because the last thing we would want to do is make all of those run cuts and then not be able to actually fill those runs and not have drivers to transport students at all. That would be a big problem. And so that is the one that we've chosen to put in here as the most responsible selection out of the three options. And then there are the other sample option ones. So each of those comes out to approximately $1 million. It's not to say that it would be all sample option one or all sample option two, but it would have to be some combination of the items up there to total a $1 million budget gap. And so when we look at this, obviously none of this is something that we would want to have to do, but we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions. And one of the things that the Board of Education said is, can you show us where this money could be saved, or could come from, or could be considered, and how much it actually is, right? And so when we want to look at this, our goal is to be able to preserve programs, and to also be able to protect our current employees in order to maintain the caliber of education that we've just celebrated with the Blue Ribbon School of Excellence Award today. And the only other option is to increase our revenues. If we can't save in expenses, we have to increase our revenues. And one of the most impactful ways to do that is to ask our community to support piercing the tax cap and to increase our levy beyond the calculated maximum of the $29 million. By increasing our 26-27 tax levy by an additional $1 million, we can preserve all of our planned programs and maintain our current staffing levels to support them.
Carolyn, I have a question for you. It's definitely not a one or the other. I mean, we definitely would have to pierce the cap, but not enough to cover everything. We could balance that out and say, okay, we're gonna eliminate these 3 or 4 things and then raise taxes, maybe not to the maximum, but balance it to where, you know what I mean?
we
It's not one or the
could.
other.
Correct. And we could do that. The reality is that we've cut $721,000 already. I think we can continue to examine. We've shaved percentages off of our supply budget and our contractual budget. And, you know, at this point, we cannot fill any of the positions. We can make cuts in positions or programs. The reality is, no matter what we do from here on out, it's going to have a significant impact.
One question I had too is, the last time we did it, and there was probably not as many people watching us tonight, but we kind of went through how we got here as far as the benefits and what the increases were and stuff like that. That was a pretty telling slide. I'm not
Well,
sure
we're
if it's in
getting
this
there.
update. Oh, you're getting there.
Yeah,
Very good, thank you.
we're getting there. Next slide, Elliot.
Yep.
Okay, so piercing the tax cap by an additional $1 million would allow us to preserve academic and co-curricular programs and jobs across the district. By reducing our dependence on previous year's fund balance appropriations, it creates more manageable long-term financial health and condition. And so we will explain why that is. 2 things. One, what Chris said, how did we get here? Because I'm sure that is something that people are wondering. And then also, what would the benefits be of piercing the cap, not just this year, but what are the long-term benefits of making that decision? So when we're talking about piercing the cap, it does change the voting structure just a little bit. So when we have a regular vote or the 2% tax cap compliant budget vote, we need 50% plus 1 in order to pass. And so piercing the tax cap requires what's called the supermajority. So you are required to get 60% positive votes plus 1. And so that is a significant difference. We have not had a general fund budget fail since 2006. And since then, the general fund budget has received less than 60% only twice. And that was in the 2010 and 2024 school years.
I just want to make sure everybody understands. We don't want to do any of this. I mean, we spent years trying to get our sports back to where it's, you know, competitive, and we've got sports that kids want to and can play. We don't want to put kids on buses for an hour and a half, 2 hours, so that we can get them all on one and you know, we don't wanna kill pre-K. I mean, we built that thing so that we could see the success, which we have seen in how good our kids entering kindergarten are. It's just, if we can't find any other way, then we have to start cutting these things. And it's, I don't know, it's disheartening as hell because, like I said, we've spent years trying to establish some of these programs. To have them, you know, go out the window is.
But also understand, Harry, that until the Einsteins up in Albany come to a budget, everything we're talking about here is all conjecture. And it's all, you know, guesstimates, and if they fund us, that extra, the money we need, then none of this is going to take place.
Carolyn, what are we basing this on? I think people should know that.
The proposal, so we've seen the governor's run of the budget and then the one house proposal that gets sent out from the legislature. And so we can only essentially base it on what we hypothetically should be receiving. We always try to be pretty conservative with that. I think the big piece is foundation aid. Everybody's talking about foundation aid. They're talking about a 1% increase minimum in foundation aid. That's $29,000 for Millbrook. So, you know, at this point, more than 80% of districts are not on the foundation aid formula as it was written. So because it doesn't fit that type of district. Bless you. If it doesn't fit 80% of school districts, maybe it's time to re-examine that and figure out something that will. But again, this is all the work that we're doing on those boards, but we're not getting a lot of traction, right? Like the tax cap, some of the requests that we've been making include repealing the tax cap. That we've been told the governor does not have an appetite for that, so that will not be happening. But what could potentially be realized is some exclusions to the tax cap, which we've also been asking for. In the last, for anybody who's interested, I did a presentation in the last meeting at the end of March about some of the items that they have come back with in the one house proposal for the budget that have increased some of the aid for special interest populations, high cost students essentially. So, you know, students, special education students, students who are living either in like transitional housing, homeless students, migrant populations. So even those things will help a little bit, but it's not going to change the landscape of where we are right now in terms of just budgeting. I mean, overall, like the local school districts in the county are all dealing with this. I think one of the things that has been a help and a hindrance is that we've been really conservative in not filling positions as they vacated over the last 5 years. And so we just don't have a lot of fat to cut. So there are school districts who are in the region. I don't want to shout them out, but who are cutting 18 positions, but they're all through attrition because they have people retiring. We've been doing that as time has gone on. And so, so back to this, and if there's any other questions, yeah.
Just two, have they ever come out with, and I don't even know if you can make this broad statement, have they ever given you a proposed budget and come in at that budget? Or is it for the whole, is it always less? Like they say, we're gonna give you X amount of dollars. Is it almost all, every time, is it less than that, what they've proposed? Or can you not even make
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't swear on a Bible that it's never been. But in my time, I don't.
Since we've been in these roles over the last 4 years, we've realized a deficit of between $100,000 and $300,000 between the proposed state budget and what we actually received.
I thought so.
And so we have to come into this conversation understanding that $300,000 is about 1% of our budget. So we're allowed to carry 4% unassigned fund balance from one year to the next, but we hold harmless 1%. Basically, is that slack factor for when we get shorted in state aid.
And what if, and you might be addressing this, what if we don't get the budget by the time we need to go?
We're not going to.
We won't.
We're not going
Exactly,
to.
we won't. I knew that was the answer, I just wanted.
Yeah, and so when we're making these estimations, we are being as conservative as we can. Responsibly, we always leave very small pockets, typically in special education, honestly, because a special education student who moves into the district that requires programming outside of the district can cost in excess of $100,000 easily, and that's before transportation. So we have a couple of placeholders at this point. We used to have about 5. We currently have 2 and 1 resident. Because should we have students move in, we have to have the money to afford their programming. But we don't have a lot of, space anywhere. And so that's where Elliot was mentioning that school districts, and then I will get back to this, but that school districts can maintain a fund balance, an unassigned fund balance, or a rainy day fund of 4% of their total operating budget. Our budget is not that large in comparison to other school districts, and so 4% could get eaten up really quickly if there's, an emergency in the school district. So it's one of the things that we try to, be conservative, but we also try to get very close to exactly where we're going to need to be, because we can't necessarily rely on the state to come through with what is proposed.
And for those here and listening, is this true, what was proposed around this time last year from the state? We ended up getting about 300,000 less.
Yeah, and so even after so I want to be clear about yes, and even after there was an approved budget, we still get cuts after the fact.
Right.
And so that's the other piece, is even when we know the number that we're getting, we're still finding cuts. And we're finding cuts in areas where our costs have increased. And so that's something that we spent this entire school year arguing about transportation aid cuts when our transportation budget has gone up. And yet there's been cuts to our transportation aid. And so some of these things are without explanation. When you look in a couple of slides, we will go through what our proposed aid package looks like at this moment in time. And you'll see cuts in areas that don't make much sense, but that is what we are being given.
Caroline, this is an optimistic question, but say we pierce the cap and cover all our programs, staff, everyone. And we come September and it's actually much higher than we thought it would be. At that point, what are the options as far as the district goes? Because now we have a surplus.
Right, and so that is where, if there is a surplus, it would go into fund balance, and we could make a decision at the end of that fiscal year, at the end of the 26-27 fiscal year, we could make a decision what we would do with that money. And so there are some ways in which we can't give it back to taxpayers, but we could offset costs of other things by putting it into, so to educate those that are sitting in the audience, there's fund balance is essentially any excess that has not been spent. And so a district can only maintain in their accounts 4% of their total operating budget in an unassigned fund balance. What that means is it is just there, it can accrue interest, it can sit there, but we don't have any purpose for it. It is just there just in case. There are assigned fund balance, which is essentially reserves. And so they have to be for certain things. Like we had accrued over time about $10 million in a capital reserve. And so that was money that at the end of each fiscal year, we said we have this much left over. We're going to put it into a capital reserve in preparation for a capital project, which we just approved last year. And so there are certain areas in which we can do that. One of the areas we are currently petitioning the state is to be able to have a health insurance reserve, because when we get further in this presentation, you are going to see how the increase in health insurance costs has really negatively impacted our ability to balance this budget. And so that is one of the things that we've been talking about. We've also been talking about special education reserves, because special education year over year is about $350,000 in increases, I think, off the top of my head. And so that is no new students. That is just our same students in programs that are increasing their costs because that is what is happening with everything. And so these things would be really beneficial if we were able to say do that, right? So we're not asking you in a future budget because we have the money on hand that we can reallocate. Any other questions right now?
Couple questions. This 7.02, does that include any portion of dollars to go toward the capital project that was already approved, and what percentage would that be?
So we'll show that in a subsequent slide, when we break down the budget expense listing. There's about $900,000 of expenses, that's in the transfer to capital. That is the tax levy portion of the capital debt that we expect to occur in the 26-27 school year. So we're drawing from the $12 million, remember we had the 10 million that Caroline just spoke about, we had another 2.5 million that we put towards it. We're drawing from that and we're trying to balance out, because what we don't want to do is use all of the cash from the reserve up front and then create a debt bubble, which would hit the taxpayers in one shot. So in conversation with our financial planners and our municipal advisors, we are drawing from the reserves and from the tax levy in parallel to try to smooth out that curve as much as possible.
And then, I mean, you listed a lot of pretty undesirable options and tagged savings to each one of those. I think it's been asked multiple times by the community about closing a building or consolidating. Have we tried to tag a number to what it would look like to consolidate to 3 buildings?
We don't have that number, but we do have the reason why that number would not help us this year.
I saw, and I think we'll get to that, but that would be proceeds from selling a building. I'm saying purely consolidating a building, savings from not heating the building,
But we still have to
reduced
heat
maintenance.
We do still have to, yeah.
Not to the state minimum. There'd be clearly savings. I think we could make a swag at calculating those numbers.
And we
At
can
least
do
we did all
that.
the other ones.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, is with all the things listed, that should definitely be something listed too. None of these are good options, desirable options, but if everything's on the table, it should be on the table.
Or even leasing the building and not necessarily selling it. You do a short-term lease just in case population pops in the next 3 to 5 years, we have an option. We didn't, sell ourselves short,
Right.
but that might be additional income.
And we've also talked to our friends at BOCES who have a significant need for
Right.
classrooms, so we've been in conversation as well. But again, their budget relies on people voting for this as well, so these are things that we can't say for certain until
It's
they
not
know
gonna
what
happen
they're doing
overnight.
with their
That's the tough
programming.
thing, right?
That is the hard part when you're relying on anyone else, right? Is that we don't have any of these numbers. We don't have New York State's numbers. We can't say for certain that BOCES will be able to do that either until they have their budget finalized.
But like David said, we could, we need to have the figures on what we need to take, say, Elm and put it in a mothball where it's heated, but it's not up to state specs. You don't need all the lights, electricity, because there will be savings. And possibly if BOCES really need space, then that could be studied at a later date. It wouldn't help this particular budget, but there are other districts in the past, such as Yorktown schools, that did take the French Hill School, which was an elementary built probably in the 70s. This is back in the 80s. They ended up renting it out for maybe 5-6 years, and then when population went up, they took it back. But it needs to be everything needs to be looked at, and that's a big thing that's not in the presentation.
And we can do that.
And if we pierce the tax gap, then, the tax cap, sorry, I don't know what I said. It could then be put back on how would it be forever pierced? Well,
No, because no, so
okay,
the tax cap, this is 1 year.
1 year.
Right, and so what would happen, is it's levy to levy, so it's what you levied last year to what you levied this year, that is the calculation. That people say is 2%, but it's actually a 7-step calculation. And so for the following year, it would be what we levied that year, calculation to what we can levy the following year. So it's not that we would always need to go
Always.
through, right?
okay, thank you.
And so, back to this. So we already reviewed that piercing the cap, our year-to-year change in the levy would increase 1.95 million or 7.02% and required a number of cuts that we listed on the previous slide. So that would be without piercing the cap. That estimated impact would be $1.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. And so with that, that already includes the tax levy needed to cover the capital expenses. So someone asked that question before. And so that is not piercing the cap, 1.9 million. And so that would be including the capital already. By adding the 1 million to the tax levy, the year-to-year change would be $2,951,101 or 10.62%. And that would preserve all the district programs and positions as currently anticipated. And so that would add 57 cents to $1,000 of assessed value based on the current data that's available for our school district. And so the next slide explains some of those options. So you have there the illustration, and essentially that is with a taxable assessed value home of $350,000. And so you can see there with the $1 million difference all the way on the right-hand side, the difference would be $16.63 per month. And so we've had some questions that have come in, and so I want to just highlight them. We are listening. We are considering anything that's been suggested, but the district, could they benefit from donations from high net worth district residents? Donations are typically for one-time expenses. And so essentially when we're talking about a school district budget, we're talking about recurring expenses over time. And so one-time donations, while they may delay the budget deficit, they're not going to alleviate the stress of the budget. And so would it help to close the building? It does not provide a quick fix. We do have to maintain the building in the ways in which we would still have to pay utilities and maintenance to keep it in good condition for future renters or buyers. So that is one of the things that the state does require, is that any owned asset by the district has to be maintained. Legal requirements it's not instant. It requires a public hearing and community votes, and it's often a multi-year process. One which we did engage consideration back in the 17-18 school year, and the community was opposed to it, though I do know that there might be more of an appetite at this point. And the other thing is that there is significant uncertainty to that. We can't actually guarantee that it will sell. We can't guarantee that anyone would like to rent it. And so it could potentially sit vacant in a neighborhood, right? No matter which school we're talking about, it's either right in the middle of a neighborhood or adjacent to a neighborhood. And these factors, we obviously cannot rely on for this year in the short term for our budget. And so is there any additional funding available from the state or government? And I think it's important to talk about this. We do receive federal grants, but our federal grants have also been cut very significantly. And so when we're talking about that, we can't really rely on that. A lot of what was at one time maintained in grants has been moved into the general fund budget because our grants have been cut so significantly. And again, we're not even sure why some of those cuts are happening. Last year in August, from August 8th, I believe it was, till the start of the school year. So we're talking about just a couple of short weeks. Our population of English language learners doubled in a 2.5 week period. And yet our grant money associated with those students did not change. And so it's really hard to understand how these grants are funded to begin with. And so same with them, we hear an initial figure, and then we sometimes get notification after the school year has already started and we've already allocated funds that, oh, you actually won't be getting that, you'll be getting this much less. And so again, our current state aid package, if you look at that, is $4,974,859, or an increase of $239,000 or 5%. However, the actual state budget package that we have gotten over the last couple of years has been around 100 to 300,000 less than projected at the time of budget adoption in recent years. So while we look at a quote unquote increase this year of 239,000, what history has told us is we probably won't get any of that. And so as we go forward, we do apply for competitive grants. Those are grants that come from private donors. We do apply for those. We have successfully won many of those. However, sometimes they're small, sometimes they're very targeted and narrow focused. Other times you have to lay out money for you to get the same amount of money. And so we try to benefit from anything that we can, but some of this is just not as cut and dry as we would like it to be able to benefit from it. So those are some of the additional FAQs. How does the piercing the cap help the district long term? So piercing the cap would reduce the district's reliance on our annual appropriation from the previous year's fund balance. So that's extremely helpful. That would help to level the tax levy growth in years to follow. So we're going to show you a slide of the negative impact of not going up to our tax cap in previous years. Prior to Elliot and I being in this position, that decision was made twice in the last 10 years. And so you can see the immediate impact of that in the following year's budget. And so that is something that I think is important to highlight. When you look at that, you can then understand how piercing the tax cap this one time allows to level off the difference between our expenses and our revenues. So we will have a chart that will explain that a little bit clearer. And nope, we're good. We've answered that the capital project is already included. And so Elliot's going to take over and speak about some facts and figures specific to the 26-27 budget.
So when we break down the budget, we break it into three components. You'll hear sometimes the phrase the tripartite budget discussed, and some of these words were used in the BOCES budget. So there's the admin portion, the program portion, and the capital portion. Our program component is the largest by design, as it should be. It's the student-facing portion of our budget, and the proposed budget would be 76.45% program. The admin portion being 9.93, and the capital portion being 15.06. It's actually 15.04, so I have to correct that on the previous slide because it did come down just a touch. But this, as presently configured as of March 30th, this would be the smallest administrative portion. And as Caroline said, we've already cut over $700,000 out of the budget projection, and that does include an administrative position, which would be included in that admin section. We're trying to keep as much of our money facing our students as possible. And sometimes between admin and capital, and a lot of those things we cannot control, like insurance rates, benefits rates, and things of that nature. So this is a general preview of the budget expense projections. All of our budget categories are listed here. This is how we report them to the state. So this is how we build our budget. And we want to just highlight the big changes. What you'll see is the difference in dollars and percentage points going forward. So you'll see total special programs in schools. That is what Caroline referred to. That 300,000 that she referenced on the top of her head is just one part of it. Overall special ed expenses are projecting north of $605,000 in increase. Our pupil transportation numbers, again, $413,000 increase. And that's not just home to school runs, but like we said, we have a number of out of district and place runs. So as the special ed budget goes up, sometimes the transportation budget does also go up in parallel because we account for those dollars in separate categories, but they all relate to the same pool of children. And you'll see that the interfund transfers, that's at $951,000. So the reason that's a huge number is because we haven't really had a big transfer to capital before, but that's how we move the money to pay for those anticipated capital improvement expenses that'll be incurred in the 26-27 school year.
Hey, Elliot, just to clarify, Board of Education, what's that line?
Board of Education line.
I know we'll get a question, that's why I wanted to
The
point.
$446.
No, the total budget, the $74,000.
707. I'm sorry. The 74,000.
Yeah.
So that's all expenses related to the Board of Education's work. That accounts for paying our poll workers that do the elections every year. That's all the collateral that goes into the budget. And Cheryl can speak to this better than I can if we need to. But I know off the top of my head that every dollar that we spend on board things, it's not just the board members, you guys work for free and we appreciate that. But the things that you do cost us money, whether that's in trainings, whether that's in legal counsel, whether that's in notifications we send to the public, and everything that we do in preparation of our annual vote. All of those expenses, including the Board Docs digital platform that we utilize to share our board agendas, all of those are accounted for in that Board of Education category. And I will note that as a shout out to Cheryl, our expenses have gone up significantly in just software and collateral, and Cheryl's been able to shave down other expenses to keep that as level as humanly possible. I think that's $400 is pretty negligible. But that is in light of, I'd say, multiple $1,000 expense increases within that category.
She keeps us in line.
She keeps us all in line, and I definitely want to give credit where it's due. But there's a lot of management happening. So, but to your point, Chris, even when the dollars don't change significantly, there's still a lot of work happening in the background to balance it out, right? Because within these codes, there's stuff we can't control, and then we try to trim what we can when we can. So here's the revenue side of the budget, and you'll see at the top, you're going to see your tax levy. So we talked about adding the $1 million to pierce the tax cap and what that would look like year to year. We did explain that on the previous slide, but here's the line item that it would be represented in our revenue budget. I want to also share that, as Caroline noted, we're increasing our revenue lines from our BOCES partners, and we'd love to see that number go north of that 30,000, but at this time, we can't commit to that. So I think it's important to share with folks that there's a lot of great things that were shared, both in potential reductions, like if we were to collapse ourselves into 3 buildings, there could be revenue or expense savings from the operating costs of some of those things. But the offsets in terms of revenues that we can't guarantee, we can't anticipate. So we cannot plan to spend money we don't bring in. And so there's a lot of real positive things we could do. And if they do happen, we could reallocate some of those monies, but we have to really be conservative with what we can count on at the time that the board adopts this budget. I also want to highlight that our early college COSER, the reason why there's no budget to budget difference is because this is a brand new service that was introduced this year, and Millbrook was one of the pioneering districts to participate. So when our leadership team says that we're doing everything possible to find money, Caroline and Dr. Watkins collectively put us into this COSER. We were one of the first 4 districts to participate. And in doing so, we were able to generate almost $500,000.
Actually, kudos to Dr. Watkins, because we were the first ones to jump on board, and she had to find another district to get on board so we could benefit from the BOCES.
100%. And so that's $500,000 in revenue. And what that means is we're basically using the BOCES to help us pay our teachers who teach college courses. And it's a way for the state to give us back aid for the work that our teachers are already doing to educate our students at a collegiate level. So it's an amazing opportunity, and we definitely appreciate the revenue. We certainly need it. And the fund balance appropriation. So that's the number. And you can see that the 2025-26 budget, we had to allocate $1.8 million, roughly 5% of the total budget came from the previous year. It is not a sustainable figure. And so with this recommendation to pierce the cap, we would still be allocating almost $1.5 million from this year to next year, but hopefully starting to trend that number back to something that's manageable, because one incident, one emergency, one unplanned expense could wipe out our 4% unassigned fund balance, and that would make that number disappear. And then we'd be looking to cut another $1.5 million out of the budget in a worst case scenario. So trimming that number is in the district's best interest financially long-term. So we're going to touch on if the voters do not approve the budget. So with piercing the cap, we're asking for an increased tax levy of $2.9 million. And that's to cover all the expenses that we've talked about that we're projecting. If the budget does not pass on May 20th, the Board of Education has 2 options. They can propose a second budget to vote, or we can go directly to contingency. If we go to a contingency budget, we are tied to the last voter-approved tax levy, which is almost $3 million less than we're projecting to spend next year. When we do that, we have to confine ourselves to what is determined legally to be ordinary contingent expenses. The state does define what many of those categories are, and then the Board of Education can locally define it further. But at minimum, we have to remove all salary increases for non-bargaining unit staff. We have to remove all equipment purchases. We have to remove, as Caroline said, anything that is not mandated by the state has to come out of the budget. When we start to do those calculations, We found $441,000 of things that we would have to remove from the budget based on the state regulations. That leaves us a balance of $2.5 million that we'd still have to go in and find. Not to be, doom and gloom, but the reality is we've already shared two different versions of $1 million in reductions that would be uncomfortable. I think it's safe to say, without any hyperbole, that we would have to entertain every single thing in both of those option sets and still go in and find another $500,000 if we go to a contingency budget. Certainly not anything that we want to do. I don't even know if it's possible or sustainable. I don't know what school looks like if we have to remove both option packages to come out with that $2 million and then fund another $400,000. But if that becomes necessary, we will have to workshop that both as an administration and with the Board of Education's input to formally designate what the board would consider an ordinary contingent expense beyond what is legally required. And so, in short, the proposed budget that we're offering is inclusive of piercing the tax cap by $1 million. It increases the levy by $2.951 million, increasing the budget by $3.178 million, or 8.92%. Questions?
It feels like there's a lot of risk with piercing the tax cap. And I sort of feel like we need to meet our rubbers halfway with some targeted cuts beyond something between sort of that catastrophic level of cuts and preserving overhead positions as currently anticipated. Feels like we need a middle ground.
Agreed.
Yes. At this point, I would actually like to put a motion out there to change the agenda to open up the public session now and not wait for another couple of hours of our discussions. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. The public session. Just, if you would, stand up and introduce yourself. Please address the board and, sometimes these things get a little carried away, so.
I'm Emma Miller. I'm part of the PTO. My question is, how often do we put forth the motion to pierce the tax cap? Like how common is that? And historically, what have we seen?
So actually it was in a previous budget presentation. I thought we had included it for tonight as well, but if you can just go back to the historical.
Give me 1 second. I can put up, this is from the last board meeting's presentation.
And these are all archived. All the meetings are out there recorded. You can refer back.
So this is as far back as we have records of and within the tax cap era. The tax cap's only been around since I believe 2011, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so in that time, what you can see is this is the history of the tax levy in Millbrook for those first few years. And what you can see is the blue bar is what the levy, the tax cap was, and what the actual tax levy was in red. And so when we're looking here, we did not go to the max levy in 13-14, and then we had to pierce the cap in 14-15. So there's a direct correlation. Now, I can't speak, we try to be very careful to not speak to competing priorities and the decisions that were made at the time. I don't want to say what I think happened. I can only tell you what we have evidence of happening. And so what you can see is we have evidence to show that when we did not go to the max levy, we had to pierce the cap the year directly following. And so there's been in this, recent history, there was 1 year that we didn't max levy, and then we had to pierce the cap, and then we also didn't max levy, and then the tax cap and the levy were very minimal, and then we did not max levy. And so I think one of the things
Do you have the line graph? Because I feel like that.
yeah, I do. I want to show that on the next slide, but I want to show that the other thing that we want to share, and I think it was to Chris LaBelle's point earlier, is it's a year-to-year calculation, right? But every subsequent year is based on the previous year. So every year that we don't levy to the maximum, we're inhibiting our ability to levy the following year. And so there's kind of a snowball effect that happens if districts continue to under levy based on immediate need without long range projection. So you can see here, this is a graph of the inflation factor. This is told to us by the state. So the state tells us what they think inflation has done in the year. And then that's one of the 7 figures that goes into the tax cap calculation. 22, 23 and 23, 24 together, we had over a 12%, almost a 15% inflation factor or rate of inflation. The cost of doing business went up significantly. There was a huge bubble in the cost of doing business, and our ability to levy was relatively consistent through that period. We also want to show, again, this was a slide that we shared last week or last meeting, and we can include it in the next presentation. But you can see that the blue line is our budget. The red line is the tax cap and the yellow line is the levy. And you can start seeing that the gap between the blue and the red start to widen out pretty significantly. And when we're asking the public to support us in piercing the cap, it's to bring that yellow line closer back to the blue line so they can move in parallel to reduce that gap.
So it's been 10 years since we
last pierced.
2014.
We believe so, yeah. I don't have any records to show that that's not the case. I wasn't here, so it's hard for me to guarantee it.
Based on the information.
But based on what we have here, the last time that we pierced the cap was 2014-15 school year.
Thank you.
Laura Karen, kids are at the district. How do you guys plan to communicate this?
Sorry.
How do we plan to communicate this? Like this part of our district needs to hear this information so many times. As you know, I mean, I came out and supported Capital as a big voice. I can't do it again. I can't do it again. It's overwhelming to me. But like, what's the plan to tell everybody? Like I said this jokingly to someone, like, no one's going to be happy with the capital project budget till they see workers on the roof, right? Because they need to hear it. They need to hear incrementally. Because silence to this community means that someone's doing something sneaky. So like, what's the plan to communicate this in a way people can digest it? Because I listen, that's how I digest it, but that's not how everybody does.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we sent out, the postcards. And then I go get my mail in the post office and I see 300 of them in the garbage can. We have these meetings and I know, I get everybody's busy, the only effective way that so far we've seen this, move forward is word of mouth. Come vote. And whether you vote yes or no, come vote so we know what's actually happening, what people really think. I mean, if the majority of the people come out and say, they don't care, go to contingency, it doesn't really matter. Then, we get our direction. But right now, I don't know. I mean, it's on our Facebook stuff, it's on our website, it's in the postcards. I don't know.
The only issue with word of mouth is that, like with the capital project, there was a lot of misinformation, a lot. And I looked on Facebook before I came here and I noticed there were some slides on there, which is fantastic because a lot of people nowadays get their information from social media, whether it's 100% or not. But a lot of the comments on it, and I don't know how to get this out there. I'm not as good as you. What you did, what some of the public did was fantastic to say, they're like, oh, well, this, and then somebody posts something and then it gets out of hand and it's, again, misinformation or, you could say like, come to the school, come to a meeting, and nobody does. So I know from a taxpayer point of view and from being involved in it, it's so frustrating to see that people are very quick to write down something on social media and then it kind of spirals out of control, whether it's true or not, but nobody takes the time to come to a meeting, like most of us on the board, all of us on the board come to do this because we either had kids in the school, have them now, really care about it, and it's, you know, it's very time consuming. It's every other week coming here, but, you know, I can speak for myself, probably others, like, I want my kid to go to a great school, and I'm so excited, I love Millbrook. And we all want this to work, and we're trying to do it as hard as we can, so I would say if anybody has great ideas, please send them to Caroline. You know, it would be great to get the correct information out to everybody and not have the misinformation like we did last time. That was, as you said, can't do it again.
And I'm
hard.
happy to have as many public presentations, as people will attend.
I think we have to separate the two.
Yeah.
I think we have to separate, like, this is the actual budget for the year. This is what we're doing at Capitol.
Yeah.
I think that you need to hear it, unfortunately, in a really simplified manner.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too. It needs to be brought down so that everybody can understand it. As much, oh, sorry, hi, I'm Lauren Kelly. Kids are in the district's employee, you wear a lot of different hats. But I think even as an educated person, sometimes these terms are big terms, right? So as much as we can bring it as far down as possible so that everybody can understand it, I think is going to be a very crucial piece to this as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you know, the most important thing, and it has nothing to do with the capital project, and unfortunately, we just went through that and now we're here, and people, that's the immediate connection. And really, I think what we have to simplify is, you know, this went up, this went down, this is where we're left. You know, and if we don't, you know, make this up by piercing the cap, this is what we could lose. All people see is we're gonna, you know, stop, you know, athletic teams and everything else, and they get upset. I'm glad they do, you know, but hopefully that'll make them turn out and try to vote or come and ask questions. That's all I ask for.
And as much as we can, maybe give the information, like our transportation budget was this much and now it's this much. Like they used to give us this much and now they don't. And I don't know how much of that can go on like a social media page or something, but you know, and the only reason I know is because I go to the meetings, you know, like maybe if people could see it on, again, social media or something, just like, I wrote English language learners, you know, we have more children that don't speak English that are in the district, but we're not getting any more money to teach them or to hire a teacher or whatever it is. And the transportation budget, cost of everything, we all know is going up. And New York State is not giving us the money. So does everybody want to write to Kathy Hochul? Maybe. Or what else can we do to, you know, scream and yell and kick and say, you know what, this isn't fair. You're asking us to pay for all of this stuff. You're not giving us enough money. And we can't
yes,
afford it.
those are the like hidden costs of education, right? Like I don't think, I mean, I do see some educators both from the district and outside of our district, but so they know what's being asked of us, you know, on a daily basis, but people don't understand schools don't just educate kids anymore. We're responsible for, you know, social emotional health. We're responsible for 2 meals a day. We're responsible for so many things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, right? There are so many kids who have family structures that can support that, and there's so many who have family structures that don't. And so if not us, then who, right? And so we have to say that we have to do these things, but we don't get any more aid or any more personnel to be able to do these things, right? So we're continuously being asked to do more with less. And so that's really the hard, you know, place that we're stuck in, is that we want to be able to do all of these things for our kids. The reality is that when we say yes to something, we are saying no to something else. And it's just a matter of where does that breakage come from? Do we have any more questions here? Because we do have some from online. Yep, go ahead.
So I'm Rich. I have one kid in the district, one kid in this social special ed program here. So first off, thank you guys. I am the guy that comes to learn these things, right? Because never been particularly interested in it until, you know, I have one question and then just kind of one comment, like public comment. The question, the one thing I don't really understand, the gap in funding, is that if the state does give us our money, you said it was proposed at like $4 million. We usually miss by 100 to 300. So, you know, small amounts comparatively. And we've got a gap of 2. If the state funds, are we good or,
No.
okay,
No, and so that's the total aid package, which is already, yeah. So when we're talking, we do a zero-based budgeting, and so our goal is our expenses match our revenues, right? And so our revenue package that's there, all told, is essentially 4,974,859, which is an increase supposedly of 239,000 from last year to this year. And you will see some of the tricky things. And again, this is where I think Laura had said that there needs to be like incremental information. And there is, if you watch this entire budget series, as we get information, we do much smaller bits of information. So you'll see something like, let's just go to universal pre-kindergarten, for example, right? The state says in the 26-27 column that they're giving us $250,000, right? That's part of our total aid package. So that's actually mistruth. We get a per pupil allocation of funds. So we only get $250,000 if we have enough kids to get $10,000 times child equal that amount, right? So in the last couple of years, we've had, let's just say round numbers, 30 kiddos, right, in pre-K. And so we get 30 times 10 in this case. In previous years, it was $5,400. And so we don't necessarily get $250,000. We get $250,000 if we have enough kids to get that.
so you're planning on X amount of dollars minus the 300 and then the gap remains beyond there? And that's-
Correct.
Okay.
And so when we work these figures into our total revenue package, the gap remains at 20, at 2.5.
Okay, so the comment that I want to say is first, thank you guys for walking us through this, and I found it very helpful. But the position that it puts me in as a father, and this isn't directed for you guys to answer, I just want to make the public comment, is I see very little reason to stay in New York. I see little reason to stay in New York. We pay the second highest total in the country behind Illinois. Inflation is ridiculous. And I'll be honest with you, I planned to stay here for a long time. Born and raised in Dutchess County. Never left. I take a lot of pride in my child's education. My son he has a little bit of a speech impediment, so he takes part in the special ed program. If we've increased the levy fully for 6 years and our state government isn't capable of providing you guys a budget, and we're paying the highest levy, and I don't get pre-K, and I don't live within 2 miles of the district, but you're gonna tell me that my kid has to be driven to school every day. I mean, it feels draconian. And I understand, I don't mean that in any way towards anybody here. Like, I understand your dollars and cents and I get it. But the comment that I would want, and maybe I will write this to Hochul, maybe I will write this to Albany, maybe I will find another way to voice this, because I don't want to leave. But our taxes are oppressive. And then if we're then not getting anything for it and our money is going to, I don't really know. Be honest with you, I've never been to a budget hearing before for a school district. They've got a master's degree in finance. I feel like I'm relatively well educated. But I have no idea what the state does with my money. And if I feel like I'm not getting anything for my money, I work remotely. My wife is a teacher. She's certified to go teach anywhere. Like, why would I stay? And that's, again, that's not directed at anybody here, but that's the sentiment that I think, at least I as a taxpayer, and I think other taxpayers are probably feeling as they see these potential cuts to our kids, so.
And so I wanna just focus in on one thing you just said. The inflation, right, it's crazy. And so when we go to the tax cap calculation, that's that 7-part calculation that we do, the state gives us an inflation rate. This year it hovered around 2%. So I don't know if you have felt inflation around 2% in New York in a very long time. I have not. But that is what we are able to calculate into this growth factor. And so Elliot, can you pull up from previous presentation? We had the increase to our health insurance and our district insurance rates.
Yep.
And so previously, when we first started this budget process in January, we were told that the health insurance rate would be increasing by 16.43%. Which ate up the entire tax cap calculation along with the district's insurance rate increase of between 10 and 12%. And so when we're trying to look at the total expenses, how much we're going to need to spend to operate a school district, and we have two things outside of our control that are essentially eating up the amount of money that we can increase in levy because we're only feeling inflation of 2%, right? And so this is what we are battling. And as I've said, the governor does not have an appetite for repealing the tax cap. So, we feel your pain,
Yeah.
right? We feel it differently, but we feel your pain.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's just, it feels unrelenting in this state. And I know you guys are doing everything you can. So like, please don't take my comment as any direct.
No, we don't, but I do want to just point, because someone did ask, how are these things happening? And so, $574,000 in increased taxes, or sorry, increased health insurance, and that is after that rate was reduced from 16.43 down to where it is right now, which is just under 10%. And so that right there, plus, like I said, the increased cost of educating students with disabilities, right? It's our responsibility. It's one we take very seriously. We make sure our kids get what they need. But it's gonna cost us almost $400,000 more next year to do that. And then our insurance, the insurance for the school district has gone up between 10 and 12%. We don't have exact figures on that yet.
I don't understand how we can pay the state the amount of money that we pay them in contrast to other states and provide nothing extra. It doesn't, the math doesn't add up to me, but I know that's not you guys directed. It's just why stay if they're not capable of providing anything beyond any other state?
Does anyone else in New York? Yeah.
Matthew Paquet, I have a daughter at Alden and I'm the PTO president. Two questions really quick. The first one is, I'm just curious where we're at in conversations with local government officials. Do we have their support on the tax levy? Are they willing to get out there and kind of champion this initiative so that, you know, our community members are, you know, aware of, you know, how this is currently impacting us and what it could do to alleviate the concerns we have with regards to the school district? And then the second one, I'm just going to pose a question that was asked previously, kind of like in reverse. It's, you've got PTO members here today. I know a number of them are online watching right now. You've got the, you know, sports boosters programs here. We're here today because, you know, the majority of the programs being discussed have a direct impact on the work that we do as volunteers in the community. So I'm posing the question is, what can we as two committees who are clearly here because we want to provide support to you guys, what can we do to help you guys support this initiative and kind of navigate through the community, getting the information out, disseminating it, and giving people enough, you know, information so that they can make informed decisions that hopefully are in support of, you know, some of the suggestions that you guys are making.
I think, to go with the, see how I put this, the question about our, you know, basically the mayor and the town supervisor, and they've got their own problems to, you know, with state aid coming down and taxes, they gotta raise taxes up, and I don't know as, I think they're more focused on their jobs and town running, keeping the village running, than they are with, you know, what's the school district doing. You know, I'm sure there's individual individual opinions of good, bad, or indifferent. So I don't really, I don't think they, even with the capital project was not necessarily supported by some of the other, town leader, village leaders. So that's kind of a difficult question. I think the second part of your question is, we need to work together to do this. The only reason it worked for the capital project, in my opinion, was because the parents got out, started screaming and yelling, kicking doors, whatever. And they drove it over. You could see by the number of people that voted. The first vote was, maybe a couple, 300 people voted. The next one was a couple, 300. And then when the parents really came out, it was like well over 1,000 people voting. And I think the taxes have almost become one of these things where people go, there's nothing I can do. They're gonna raise taxes go up, there's nothing I can do. If there's any way that we can, this doesn't have to be a board meeting. I mean, if you're having a PTO meeting with all the members of PTO, excuse me, all the members of PTO or some of them, and you want us to come in and re-explain this stuff, tear it apart, whatever. What's in that line item? I'll tell you right now, the tax cap calculation, we could spend 2 hours going through what the hell goes into the tax cap. But I think that's the real way for us to deal with sports boosters, music boosters, PTO, MEF, is the more that we can help, educate everybody on why this is so. I think that's probably the best. I mean, if you guys can work with, Caroline or someone in administration to get one of these meetings set up, we'll be there.
I think we just gotta continue to simplify and try to hone in on the message as far as what it is. And, as a board, we just have to be careful in what we ask for and who we ask for. There's a lot of red tape that we don't want to come back to haunt us either. So, but no, all the support we can get is appreciated.
And just as a response to you, I just want to say thank you for your honesty and your candor over there, Perry. I do appreciate that. It's also disheartening to hear that, our local government officials maybe are too busy to worry about something that does directly impact our community. And I think it goes hand in hand with their operations and what they're doing in, day-to-day government and what you guys are doing here with regards to education. And it'd be nice to see a little bit more, interdepartmental cooperation as opposed to maybe kind of you stay in your lane, I stay in my lane type of thing. Breaking down silos is oftentimes the easiest way to come up with a viable solution. So, the silos over here are clearly broken down and we're willing to work with you guys and do whatever we can to support you. I just hope that we could all collectively come together as a community and find a way to make this happen.
And I want to say thank you. I also want to say that myself and my administrative team have also met with Hinchy's office. And we've met with DB Barrett's office. They gave us their time very graciously. They were a great audience. Interestingly enough, there's some confusion on the part of elected officials who are making some of these decisions in terms of what remains in law, codified in law. And so we even spend time educating them on some of the challenges that we're facing that they don't know, right? They don't see it boots on the ground. And so we've had hours of time with them. We've spent time with Shelley Mayer's office, like I said, the Senate Education Chair. In November, we had 110 superintendents and elected officials from the region in a room down in Harrison, having many of these same conversations. Again, in January, I believe it was, we had a virtual forum where we spent time with, Senate and Assembly members, superintendents and board members from around the region. So we are doing everything that we can to have our voices be heard. I shared some memos before about the ways in which we're trying to insulate public school districts against these unfunded mandates and everything. And so, I shout out to the board members and the superintendents around the region who are doing that, because that's in addition to trying to run school districts that we're doing this. But it's that important for us because we're seeing public education be attacked on so many fronts, right? And funding is just one of the ways in which it's just becoming increasingly more challenging to, have the roles that we have and do the work that we do, but we do it for kids. And so I genuinely appreciate your offer. I will make myself available. If you give me dates, I will be there. I know Elliot, Amy, we do what we can to make it to as many things as we can. And in this case, we're happy to do it just to get the message out.
Thank you.
I'm assuming similar to the capital project, we'll probably have one or two public outside of the board meeting.
Yeah, we
I'm
can.
assuming.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
For sure. And so we do, if no one else has any other questions from the audience here, we do have a couple of questions online. Richard Gunn asks, why is there an RFP for next year's UPK program currently on the website? Is the district expecting an influx of students which will exceed the capacity of Elm Drive, or is Elm Drive's program being eliminated? Neither of the above. I mentioned earlier that there are some grant funds that we receive. Part of the requirement to receive those grant funds is that we have to have an allocation, a set aside allocation of 10% of those funds that come in through grants. And that has to be targeted for community-based organization participation in the program. And so we put an RFP out there that highlights what we're expecting of these community-based organizations to partner with us. And so in previous years, we did have a CBO in the beginning of pre-K time here. But I believe last year and the year before, we did not even have any applicants. So, but we are required in order to benefit from those grant funds to do that.
Okay.
The next one does not have complete information. And then the third one, Christina Myers, I saw that there's proposals to cut numerous positions, but nothing on the administrative level. Are there plans to review that level as well? So that's inaccurate. We currently have a vacant administrative position that we have not filled and do not plan on filling. So it's not a cut in a full position at this point, but it's a cut in an administrative position that has not been filled for this school year. Very intentionally, because we did not want to bring someone in and potentially have to let them go within the same school year. And we've also cut an additional position 2 school years ago. So we have been cutting the administrative team and the administrative budget. So I'm glad that question was asked so that we could clarify that for the public as well. That is it for questions.
Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you guys for coming in.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. Tell people to come in, watch it online. I think that's great that you guys are here. Except that one in the back.
Very good. What's next? Next is new businesses, the approve the seeker for Smart Schools Bond Act project. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, it's okay. You can come back to that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay, where is?
It's after the motion.
Oh, got it. Okay, next is Amy.
Yes.
I'll keep mine brief because I know it's been a long evening already, but showcasing some of the programs that we are doing that we are attempting to also seek for revenue generation is the continuing ed program. So the spring session has been posted. We have put flyers on the community site of our webpage. It's also available on our website by clicking on the right. We have a new addition this year, this spring, from one of our teachers, highlighting an escape room for kids. So check that out. In addition to our newly popular Zumba and Pound Fit and our defensive driving course. So please take a look at that. Next Trek continuing to grow, 657 pounds, believe it or not, have already been collected. And I do know some of our teachers who may be present have been part of this big collection, having their own separate bin due to their slightly competitive nature. And I appreciate that a great deal because sustainability is part of our strategic plan. So kudos to all of you. Also, I met today with the county, Dutchess County representatives on a youth vaping prevention program that the county is doing as a result of a settlement with New York State Juul Lab. So when we talk about unfunded mandates, this one is very close to that. So they have put together some programming that they will be sending me so I can review it. We have to find a staff member to send for training, and then our staff member will be doing it. So I'm discussing how that will fit within our budget and trying to make that work because it is a benefit to our students. And then we've already talked about Daniel August. He'll be coming back, and congratulations once again to our middle school. Our staff and Mr. Cabello worked really hard on earning this School of Excellence achievement and being a lighthouse school. So well done. And at the time that I wrote this, we thought that we would find out by October. So kudos, they did a great job. Just to reiterate, that our pre-K and K registration is open. So that is available on our website. If you go to registration, you'll find all the links that you need to do that. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Next is accept a donation from community foundations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right. Did public questions and comments? Do we have an exec session?
We do not.
Ah, nice. All right, no additional, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Yeah.
I know.
All of a sudden,
You
everybody's
get to
perked
hear
right
everything.
up. All in favor? Any against?